speaking today on harnessing the power of miracle thinking. And so I want to start in kind of an unusual way. And what I'd like to do is to ask you, who knows the definition of chutzpah? Chutzpah, what is chutzpah?
Chutzpah is an orphan who stands in front of the judge and says, oh, I take it back. A man stands in front of a judge and the judge says, you killed your parents, and he says, take pity on me, I'm an orphan.
Chutzpah is having tremendous nerve. So I'm going to show you my definition of chutzpah. So let me be right back. So this is my definition of chutzpah. This is me in pursuit of my dream when I wrote my first book, Crappy to Happy. And I couldn't find a publisher, and I started hearing that, that little voice in my head, and it's telling me to go do this. And I'm like, no, there's no way I am going to go do something like this. But finally, there was nothing left, literally nothing left in my refrigerator except for the box of baking soda. So I figured it was time. So this is rush hour in Mill Valley, right off the 101 freeway on a Wednesday, and I'm wearing, a dress, some heels, my naturally curly perm, makeup. Somebody drove by and gave me $3. The truth is, that night my phone rang, and a publisher offered me the job as editor-in-chief of his magazine. It was a national Mind, Body, Spirit magazine. And I turned him down. I had absolutely no money. I had no income at that time. I turned him down because I knew it wasn't my truth. And I was so willing to stand in my truth. And I told him, my truth is, I'm looking for a publisher for my book. So then he said, well, how'd you like to work this job for us until we get our right person? And then it occurred to me, perhaps I can make a connection while I'm the editor-in-chief of a national Mind, Body, Spirit magazine that I can't make while sitting in my living room waiting for my phone to ring. So I took the job, and it led from one position to the next, and eventually I did create my dream. And the dream was my first book that I wrote. It is called Crappy to Happy. And I'm sitting in a movie theater, and I did get a book deal for this book. I'm sitting in a movie theater with Suzanne and a circle of friends. It was the opening night of Eat, Pray, Love. There's a bookstore scene, and there's Julia Roberts in the bookstore scene taking my book off the shelf in the movie Eat, Pray, Love and buying it at the counter. It got a big audience laugh, and yes, sales did go up. So, well, the reason I'm sharing this story, one, it's hysterically funny, I think. It's true, it took a lot of chutzpah to go do this. And I was willing to stay true to my dream at all times. So I've always been really fascinated about, how is it that we can create miracles, like on an ongoing basis. And so I was driving in my car on the freeway, and all of a sudden I said to myself, if I had $1 million, what is it I would want? And I thought, I'm going to take workshops. Because that was something I was, and go to conferences and expos and things like that. It was something that I couldn't budget for at that time. A day later, a friend called and said, I have these tickets. My husband can't make it. I'd just like to gift you. If you want to join me, go to the Sacramento Convention Center and see John Edwards speak. They're $85 tickets. I'm like, wow, yeah, okay, thank you. That same week, another friend called. Randy, I want a pair of tickets on the radio to this self-empowerment weekend. You want to go? Yes. That flow has continued to this day. And it's been years, and it continues. And so I started thinking about, why is it that door opened for me when other doors, other things I wanted to create in my life, just didn't? And I've come up with a formula, because I think I actually figured it out. And I call this formula the Ruth IRA. So many of you have heard of like the Roth IRA, it's like in this retirement investment plan for yourself. Well, Ruth is my middle name. And IRA is actually an acronym. And I had a dream one night this is how this whole understanding evolved. And I saw the letters INSIST on a Scrabble board, because I love to play Scrabble. And insist. And I thought when I woke up, what is it that I want so much in my life that I'm absolutely willing to insist that it happens? Because when I have that level of energy and insistence, I know I will create it. It's that sense of when you know that you know that you know. You don't know how something's going to happen, but you know that you are going to create that and nothing is going to stop you. That's insistence. And that's the I in the Ruth Ira. Now here's the rub. Resistance. And this is where we go, I really, really want this. Like, I wanted a relationship. I really, really want this. I want it. Bring it to me, universe. Wait, I don't want to have my heart skewered. You know, I've been hurt before. I want it. Give it to me. No, hold back. So wherever we hold those yes buts, yes, I want it, but the energy doesn't flow, or it won't flow as quickly. It doesn't mean that we can't have our dreams, but it'll just take longer to get here. So what was the solution to yes, but? Well, obviously, I had to get off my big fat butt. And I realized, so we have insistence, we have resistance, and you notice wherever this is in your life, you want something, you want to create something, but you just look for the buts. Where are they? So the way I figured this out was the A in the Ruth Ira. And I asked myself the question, what is it that I am truly willing to allow? In terms of relationship, I said, well, I'm willing to allow a dinner out with a new person. I'm willing to allow a phone call and maybe holding hands. That was my safe zone. So sometimes we are required to take risks, like, you know, certainly doing this, the chutzpah example was a major risk, an emotional risk to do that. But sometimes there's what I call the gentle truth, and that's taking the little baby steps that will lead us towards our goals. And so what is it I'm truly willing to allow? And that is part of self-reflection, self-inquiry. It's not about anybody else's truth, but your own. So the Ruth Ira, insistence, resistance, allowing. I'd like to talk a little bit about money, prosperity. I was interviewing Susie Orman. I've been editor-in-chief, like I mentioned, National Mind, Body, Spirit magazines. I've written for those magazines. I write on these subjects. That's what my books are about. So I get to interview a lot of best-selling authors. And so Susie Orman, who's not known for being spiritual, but she told me a story that's so powerful that I share it at every sermon I give, and at business talks as well. And she told me the story that anger repels wealth. And so she's sitting in her limo in New York, downtown New York, in gridlock traffic. And she looked out her window and she saw this guy just squatting on the sidewalk. And every person who was walking by, he was just saying, "Got a cigarette? Got a cigarette?" And they're just ignoring him. And she thought, the guy's not even asking for money, he's just asking for a cigarette. She looked in her purse, she opened up her purse, and she had $75 in her purse. She goes, she's thinking to herself, I'm just gonna blow his mind. I'm just gonna give him the $75. She said she had her hand on the car door handle, and a couple walked by, and when he said, "Got a cigarette?" and they ignored him, he spit in their direction. And she said, took my hand off the door handle, put my money back. And she said, he didn't know what good was about to come his way, but his anger repelled it. So it started me looking in my own journey in life about where do I hold unforgiveness or anger in any circumstance. And it's always my goal to try to neutralize. If I can't get all the way back to love, I want to at least neutralize that kind of energy in myself so that I stay open. I think that's an incredibly powerful story. Another thing that I noticed in the creation of miracles This is something that I call the hiccup of hesitation. And so what I do for a living is that in my company, we edit books, ghostwrite books. I fly to New York, I pitch books to New York publishers, and I get people book deals. So it was 19 years ago, there's every single year in May, late May, I go to this giant publishing industry feeding frenzy called Book Expo America. And it's where I go to make deals for people. But 19 years ago, when it was my first time on this huge show floor with 40,000 people, all of whom have their own agendas, and it was definitely a deer in the headlights experience for me, as it is for anyone still who goes there and doesn't really know how to work it. So I was with a very dear friend of mine named Jill Lublin, who's a national publicity strategist. And this is what I saw, because remember, she's a publicity strategist, and I want to physically demonstrate this. So we're on the show floor, I'm a deer in the headlights, and she goes, CNN! And she's like running to CNN, USA Today, because these big publicity, these big news media people are there. And this is what I found that I did. CNN, USA Today. And I noticed inside of myself that little hiccup of hesitation. It's like, yes, I do want to go towards that goal, but I had this little hiccup of hesitation. So I decided, well, there I am 19 years ago on the show floor, and I realized I want to get beyond that. And so what I did was I physically modeled my friend on the show floor. So we're walking along, and all of a sudden I went, Ladies Home Journal. And I just walked right up to that person and made that connection. And so just notice in your life wherever you hold those little hiccups. Again, it's just something you want, but there's some fear, there's something that's holding you back. I'm just sharing kind of like different things that have led to miracles for me. One of the things, I think earlier we were hearing about saying yes. Say yes. And I say, instead of the naysayers in your life, look for the yay-sayers. Look for the yay-sayers. Who are the people who are truly supporting you on your journey? Because what I've discovered in the creation of dreams is that often the people who are closest to you are trying to protect you by telling you why you shouldn't pursue a particular dream. So it's often people outside of family members in particular, and often new people might come into your life to support you in your dreams. So do look for the yay-sayers. I had this thought just recently. Do things happen to me, or do they happen for me? And I noticed whenever I have some experience that feels like on the negative, let's call it negative side, did it happen to me? If it happens to me, I am a victim of it. If it happens for me, there's something I can learn from this and grow from, and something that I can use. And I thought that's a really good distinction and perspective. So I hope these different things that I'm sharing are helpful to you. I was attending a workshop that didn't really appeal to me. I didn't think I learned anything from it. And the next morning, I was taking a shower. I was staying at a friend's house, and I took a shower, and there were 2 pieces of soap there. There was like the little sliver left, and there was a new bar. And I reached for that little sliver, and all of a sudden, I went, oh my God, this is what I've done my whole life. I've reached for the little sliver instead of taking the big soap. Put it down, Randy, put it down. And take the big soap. So choose the big soap. Are you constantly compromising yourself for the needs of others? Are you willing to choose the big soap? So I like sharing all these different stories because sometimes you get a visual in your head or just something out of all the stories that I'm sharing, just something will just kind of say, oh yeah, that's the story I needed to hear this morning. Choose the big soap. I like that. There's a lovely facilitator of consciousness named Gary Douglas. Some of you may know him. Does this work called Access. And one of the things he says about money is that if you think you have a money problem, you really don't. You have a receiving problem. And I see that a lot with, especially with mind, body, spirit people who are generally, we're givers. We give, we give, we give, but when it comes to receiving, whether it's even, a compliment, we'll push it away, push it away. So are you open to receive like this much or this much or this much? Where is your level of receiving truthfully? Another thing that Gary Douglas says that I really like is that it's not about knowing the right answer, it's about asking the right questions. And one of the things that has helped me is to start a question with, as Gary says, what does it take for me to fill in the blank? And then just allow the universe to fill in the answer. And it may not come immediately, but it will come. To ask any question of the universe, what does it take to, or what does it take for me to? It's a good fill in the blank question. And I've used that one a lot. Now, let's say you're in the pursuit of something, you really want to create it, and it's still not happening. You've done every spiritual principle that you know, and why hasn't it manifested yet? And I believe that the universe puts us through something that I call WAIT, weight training. And what I've discovered is that typically the right people have not yet lined up, or the right circumstances haven't yet lined up. And it doesn't mean that your dream won't happen, but sometimes those two different things need to come into place, or there are lessons we need to learn before we can have that dream. So I think that's really something to keep in mind, weight training. I was watching Oprah one time, and Oprah said, she was accepting some award, and I love this, and she said, I always knew that God had a bigger dream for me than I could dream for myself. So I asked God, what is your dream for me, and will you allow me to live in that dream? Look at the results that she created. What is your dream for me, and will you allow me to live in your dream? To ask the biggest questions. Like a lot of people do some form of intentions, and we're always asking for this or higher and better. Why don't we ask for highest and best? Up the ante. Let the universe provide for you. Up the ante. Anybody here grew up in a family?
Yep.
If you grew up in a family, was there at least one person who pushed your buttons at some time, or maybe still does? Possibly? Possibly. Well, there are certainly people that know how to trigger those kinds of buttons, but I have something that I call the happy button. And so the way the happy button works is that it's something where when you hear something about yourself, it's a simple statement that has your name in it, it's just a simple statement about you that makes you happy. So for example, I'll tell you mine. Mine is, you're right, Randy. Well, let me see if it really works. Would you kindly say that?
You're right, Randy.
It absolutely works. Another one of mine is, you're brilliant, Randy.
You're brilliant, Randy.
Thank you. Yes, it does work. So I want to encourage a little exercise here. We're going to play together for a second, where it's not that somebody has to guess what your happy button is. It's you're going to tell us what you think your happy button is. We're going to say it back to you and see if it really makes you happy. So would somebody like to volunteer? Just your name has to be in it, and it's a short statement. Lorraine, brave person, brave soul, thank you.
Possibly, I'm appreciated and loved.
So the way we're going to say it, we're going to go, Lorraine, you're appreciated and loved.
Lorraine, you're appreciated and loved.
Thank you.
See, you can see the giant smile. Who else would like to try? This is a fun little game. Yes?
Sharon, I really see you.
Sharon,
I really see you.
How does that feel?
Empowering.
Empowering. Would someone else like to play? You know what's interesting? What I have found, because I've done this in many different circles and in workshops, that many times women like to hear things about their hair or their looks. Like I had one friend who hers was simple, you've lost weight. You know, it's like, oh, that made her so happy. And men often like to be acknowledged for fixing things or for solving problems or for being a helper, a hero. And so I think that's pretty cool.
I have one.
Okay,
Suzanne, I mean,
Suzanne?
you're truly a wild horse advocate.
okay, so did everyone hear that?
Yes.
Suzanne, you're truly a wild horse advocate. Suzanne,
Suzanne, you're truly a wild horse advocate.
Very, very good. I want to end with a short story where I was asking the universe, you know, I want to be rewarded. Do you ever ask the universe to be rewarded? Who does that? I thought of it. I want to be rewarded. I work really, really hard. I give to a lot of people. I help animals. I rescue, you know, all this kind of stuff. You know, I'm a good being in the world, as we all are here. And I asked the universe, you know, I want to be rewarded. A few days later, I'm visiting a new friend, and the friend has a little 5-year-old girl named Charlotte. And so Charlotte immediately, you know, takes me into her room, and we're sitting on her carpeted floor. We're playing with her little mermaid statue and her Cinderella statue and all her little dolls. And after a period of time, I went inside to speak with her mother. Within 3 to 5 minutes, Charlotte came skipping in, and she puts her hand out and says, "You've won a prize!" And she has this $5 bill, and she's handing it to me, and it's like, obviously I'm not gonna take money from a child, so I'm giving it back to her. And she goes, "No, you keep it, I've got another one just like it." And so then Charlotte was so happy, and she went running, scooting off to her room, and so, you know, I, of course, was gonna hand it back to her mom. And her mother said, "No," she said, "Charlotte is a very, very generous little girl. Charlotte does a lot of chores so she can earn money so she can give it away. That is a gift from Charlotte that I want to give to you." And I realized I was rewarded with the innocence of a child. Thank you.
Wow.
Yes.
He said you were going to explain some books.
Oh, yes, thank
You
you.
got some explaining to do.
So explain it. So the first book I wrote was Crappy Too Happy. You know, has anyone here ever experienced the dark night of the soul? Nah. Well, can we have some truth? It's never one night, is it? Is it the dark year and a half of the soul? So I wrote Crappy to Happy from a place where I was just sitting in my living room, where everything in my life had evaporated. A particular job as editor-in-chief of a Bay Area Mind, Body, Spirit magazine. Magazine got sold, was gone. Relationship ended. Somebody who I had worked for on a project who admired committed suicide when he couldn't create his dream. So my life was at a standstill, and I started asking myself a question that a very dear friend of mine, Deborah Nunes, asked whenever she was in crisis, which is, what's the most loving thing that I can do for me right now? So I just started living by that. And one day, you know, like I'd hear, what's the most loving thing I can do for me right now? Cry. What's the most loving thing I can do for me right now? Walk. Do the dishes. Whatever it was, I listened. One day I heard, sit. So I sat, and I asked, what's the most loving thing I can do for me right now? Do nothing. And that was the only answer I heard for 2 weeks, so I sat and did nothing. I had a bunch of little Hanukkah candles because my parents were always giving to charities in Israel. So I figured, well, wouldn't be breaking a rule to just light some Hanukkah candles. And so I would sit with those candles until they burnt out, which was roughly an hour and 20 minutes. At the end of 2 weeks, I felt so silent. I felt like I could hear the silence of a flame. I was just so silent. And I started thinking of my life and different stories, and I started writing these stories on a little, I don't know if anybody remembers the Mac Junior Classic with the screen this big. Teeny tiny little thing. And within a month I had 100 pages, and I thought, I think I'm writing a book, but if I'm writing a book, what book is it? And I realized that I had transformed in every single story some crappy experience into a happy experience, and that ultimately became Crappy to Happy, which led me into a whole new level of life and into my whole editing profession and everything that evolved in the book world, which has been really magnificent. So Crappy to Happy is stories, very funny stories, as you can tell I have that kind of good sense of humor, about overcoming all different kinds of experiences, followed by 4 tips to creating happiness that are based on each of those stories. And this book, it's funny, I mean, it has pigs on the cover. But I've had people who have contacted me from all over the world. People who wanted to commit suicide, people, I mean, just all kinds of stories that's really, really helped a lot of people. If you know anybody who's going through a rough time or you just want a really funny read, it's really good. For The Power of Miracle Thinking, I interviewed 40 people who experienced all different kinds of miracles. And I wanted to know, regardless of religion, there's no religion in it, I wanted to know what are the universal truths and what allows the doors of grace to open. So this book contains stories, from the 40 different people, health miracles, relationships, housing, whatever the kind of miracle it is, followed by 3 miracle thinking tips, which are action steps or insights that people had that relate to each of those stories that people can apply to create miracles in their lives. And this book is endorsed by Carolyn Mace, and they're both endorsed by a bunch of New York Times bestselling authors in the Mind, Body, Spirit realm. They're both $20. So, thank you.
How do we get one?
They're Exhibit A in the back of the room, right there. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.